In 1968, California would become the setting for a series of murders that would challenge the police, terrify the population, and become one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in United States history. A faceless killer who referred to himself as the Zodiac left his mark through enigmatic letters, cryptic codes, and terrifying threats. But the worst part? He was never captured. For over 50 years, the Zodiac mystery has haunted the minds of investigators, experts, and even ordinary curious individuals like you. Who was this killer? How did he escape the authorities and never get identified? And why did he leave clues and messages of defiance, as if he wanted to be found, but at the same time, hid in the shadows? What drove him to commit these crimes? And what was his true objective? In this video, we will dive deep into the case that not only shook California in the 1960s, but continues to cast its shadow over us today. We will revisit the murders, the clues, the letters, and the many theories about the Zodiac's identity. Stay with me, because by the end, you might realize that the Zodiac's mystery is even deeper and more unsettling than we imagined. Get ready for a journey into the darkest side of the human mind. Let's unravel the secrets of the Zodiac killer. The first murder attributed to the Zodiac occurred on December 20th, 1968, when Betty Lou Jensen and David Faraday were shot to death near Vallejo, California. They were on a romantic date, parked in a car, when a killer approached and fired at them. While it was a brutal crime at the time, it was not known that the Zodiac was just beginning his macabre journey. This case was initially treated as a simple murder of young people, with no strong suspicion that it was the work of a serial killer. However, on July 4th, 1969, a second case at a similar location, at Lake Berryessa, would change everything. Darlene Ferrin and Michael Mageau were attacked while in a parked car. This time, the killer would identify himself for the first time, leaving a cryptic letter for the police and local newspapers. The letter was defiant, with the killer claiming responsibility for the murders and stating that his mission was to kill more people. It was the beginning of a journey full of mysterious messages and a constant presence, leaving us with more questions than answers. This letter, which was sent to the San Francisco Chronicle, was just the first of many to be received over the next few years. Not only did it say he was looking for more victims, but it also contained codes that he dared authorities to decipher, as if it were a game. This need for attention and control would make the Zodiac one of the most enigmatic and studied criminals in U.S. history. One of the most intriguing characteristics of the Zodiac was his ability to manipulate the media and society. He did not limit himself to committing murders and hiding in the shadows. He wanted people to know that he was behind each act, that he was watching the police, and challenging everyone's intelligence. The letters he sent to the newspapers were full of arrogance and mystery, and the way he sent them made the case become a public spectacle. Between 1969 and 1974, the Zodiac sent numerous letters and codes. Some of these letters contained threats, others spoke about his motives, but one of the most notable was the famous 340-character letter, which contains a code still not fully deciphered. He dared investigators to solve the riddle and left encrypted clues that were like a macabre game between him and the police. These messages were not just a way to boast about his crimes, but also a means of establishing control over the game. He knew his identity was a mystery, and that the police were desperately trying to piece things together, but he was always one step ahead. Even as the years went by, the Zodiac continued to send messages and challenge society. The way the Zodiac interacted with the media, the police, and the public reveals much about his psychology. He was not just a killer. He was a manipulator, someone who wanted to create panic, chaos, and confusion. What makes the Zodiac case so fascinating is not just the mystery of his identity, but the complexity of his mind. Studies suggest that the Zodiac may have had a psychopathic personality disorder. He showed no remorse or empathy for his victims, and his actions indicated a constant search for power and control. The fact that he chose his victims randomly but in a calculated manner, and the pleasure he took in toying with the police, shows that he viewed his victims not as people, but as pieces in a game. He enjoyed being the center of attention, challenging those who tried to find him. What's most terrifying is that, Although his actions were criminal and violent, the Zodiac seemed unafraid of the consequences. He knew the authorities were after him, but that didn't seem to intimidate him. Instead, he reveled in his ability to escape and in his capacity to generate panic. He wanted to be noticed, feared, and, in a way, respected for his ability to escape justice. The murders committed by the Zodiac were not just brutal. They appeared to be carried out with a calculated coldness, always following a pattern of proximity and a distinct style. The first attack that caught attention was the case of Betty Lou Jensen and David Faraday in 1968. The couple was parked in an isolated location, seemingly unaware, when they were surprised and shot to death. At the time, this case did not raise much suspicion, but it was only the beginning. The second attack, carried out in 1969, took place in a remote area near Lake Berryessa. After approaching the two young victims, Darlene Ferrin and Michael Mageau, the killer shot them at close range. What makes this case particularly disturbing is that, after committing the attack, the Zodiac approached his victim, Michael, and calmly drew a symbol on his car, a circle, with a cross in the center, a hallmark of his identity and a direct taunt to the police. But the most iconic of all Zodiac attacks occurred in 1968, near an isolated road. The Zodiac, with his dark presence, attacked a couple once again. He not only killed them, but also left chilling messages with cryptic codes. Each murder he committed was, in some way, tied to his desire to manipulate the media, leaving his mark on the collective imagination of California. The victims of his fury were many, but the fact that he showed no remorse, nor any intention of stopping, left the population completely terrified. The Zodiac continued to hide in the shadows, but his ego always seemed to be present, with his letters challenging the police to hunt him down. After the murders, police from various cities in California began to collaborate on an investigation, trying to piece together the puzzle left by the killer. The letters, the codes, and the testimonies of surviving victims were the only clues leading to a possible profile of the criminal. But the Zodiac was a master at evading the authorities. The case sparked a media frenzy, with newspapers publishing the killer's letters, which, paradoxically, only fueled the Zodiac's desire for attention. He considered himself superior to the police, constantly challenging their skills and knowledge, embedding codes and messages that no one could decipher. This led to international investigations and even theories that the Zodiac could be someone from high society with deep knowledge of human psychology. Over the years, many theories about the Zodiac's identity have emerged. Some believed he had a military background, given his knowledge of maps and remote areas, while others suggested he could have been a common criminal who used the media to create a mystery around himself. There are even theories speculating about the Zodiac's connection to sexually motivated crimes, although this was never confirmed. Clues led to different suspects over the years. In 1971, Detective Dave Toschi and journalist Paul Avery, who were leading the investigations, began focusing on a specific man, Arthur Lee Allen. He became a prime suspect due to circumstantial evidence, such as the fact that he owned a Zodiac-branded watch, but he was never confirmed as the true killer. The encrypted codes sent by the Zodiac were undoubtedly the most mysterious and fascinating aspect of the case. Cold and calculating, he sent coded messages that challenged even the best cryptographers of the time. His greatest enigma was a 340-character cipher, which became an obsession for many and remains unsolved to this day. This cipher, a combination of letters and symbols, was sent to the San Francisco Chronicle in 1969 and quickly became a symbol of the challenge the Zodiac posed to investigators. The fact that he enjoyed this game of manipulation, where he always seemed to be one step ahead, created growing tension in the attempts to understand what he was truly trying to say. The idea that there was a deeper and more disturbing message hidden between the lines further fueled the mystery. But the Zodiac also sent simpler messages, such as the letter in which he described the details of his crimes and spoke about his desire to kill. The first letter he sent, explicitly stating that he was seeking slaves for eternity, reflected his warped and disturbing view of life and death. The fact that he sent so many letters, each more enigmatic than the last, only intensified the myth surrounding his figure. Although many of the codes and messages have been deciphered over the years, the Zodiac's identity and the key to fully understanding his psyche remain shrouded in mystery. The search for the Zodiac's identity became an obsession for investigators, journalists, and even amateurs. Over the decades, numerous theories and suspicions have been raised about who the killer might have been, but the truth is that a definitive confirmation has never been obtained. The Zodiac always remained in the shadows, and his letters never left a clear enough clue to bring him to justice. The lack of concrete evidence and the changing nature of his letters and messages led to much speculation. Several suspects were considered over the years, but the true identity of the killer has never been confirmed. Arthur Lee Allen, the main suspect, died in 1992 without ever being tried, and to this day, there are unresolved questions about his connection to the case. In 2021, a group of amateur investigators claimed to have found new evidence that could point to a new suspect. But even with advances in technology, such as DNA testing, the Zodiac's identity remains a mystery. Even with the case being archived, the Zodiac's legacy endures in popular culture, making it one of the most intriguing unsolved serial killer cases of all time. Although the Zodiac killer case occurred over 50 years ago, his influence on popular culture is stronger than ever. The mystery surrounding his identity, the disturbing nature of his crimes, and the way he challenged both authorities and the media continue to captivate not only true crime enthusiasts, but also society at large. The Zodiac became an icon of fear, manipulation, and unsolved crime, perpetuating his figure in books, films, and documentaries. In the years following the peak of the murders, the case was extensively explored in various books, such as Zodiac by Robert Graysmith, one of the first works to deeply detail the case and attempt to link the Zodiac to potential suspects. The book was adapted into a film of the same name, released in 2007, which followed the journey of journalists and detectives who dedicated themselves to solving the case. The film not only brought a new generation of fans to the case, but also revived the mystery in an era when investigative tools were far more advanced. In addition to the film, the Zodiac case also inspired a series of documentaries, podcasts, and even fictional productions, all trying to explore different aspects of his story. The mix of unresolved mystery, cryptic codes, and the search for the killer's identity provided fertile ground for the creation of theories, fueled by those who, like the investigators of the time, became obsessed with the idea of finally understanding who the Zodiac was. One reason the case remains so relevant is the fascination with the mind of a killer who always seemed to be one step ahead of the authorities. The Zodiac, in many ways, represents one of the greatest challenges for the police of all time. His ability to evade investigations, the letters and codes he sent, and his apparent indifference to capture contributed to the construction of his image as an unbeatable enemy. The idea of a killer whose motivations and identity remain unknown is something that continues to haunt the public even decades after the crimes occurred. Furthermore, the Zodiac's relationship with the media has also been a source of reflection on the role that journalists and crime coverage can play in shaping the narrative of a case. The fact that he sought so much recognition through the letters he sent to the press raises questions about the nature of fame, fear, and manipulation. The Zodiac, more than just a criminal, became a cult figure, a symbol of an unsolved mystery that remains undefeated. With the advancement of forensic technology, many believe that identifying the Zodiac may finally be possible. In recent years, new investigative methods, such as DNA analysis and genetic genealogy, have been applied to try to solve cold cases. The Zodiac case, with its numerous clues and letters sent to the press, remains one of the most tempting for modern investigators, who now have tools that the detectives of the time could never have imagined. In 2021, a group of private and amateur investigators used genetic genealogy to identify suspects in old cases. With the help of DNA databases like GEDmatch, they were able to identify and trace relatives of criminals. Although a definitive culprit for the Zodiac case has not yet been found, this method renewed hope that the killer's identification may finally be achieved. In addition, authorities continue to explore new clues that occasionally surface. Even after decades, the case still receives attention from new generations of investigators and true crime enthusiasts. Various advances in mapping technologies, facial recognition, and even artificial intelligence could also help solve the case. The growing interest in the case has even led to new collaborations between police agencies and amateurs who share information and theories about the case. In 2020, a new analysis of the famous 340-character cipher was conducted, and although parts of the code still remain undeciphered, there were new advances in understanding the hidden messages. This further fuels the hope that, over time, new pieces of the puzzle will fall into place, revealing the identity of the killer. However, the truth is that, despite all attempts, the Zodiac remains one of the greatest enigmas in the history of unsolved crimes. As new evidence emerges and investigations are revived, the question remains, will we ever truly discover who the Zodiac was? In the meantime, the case continues to haunt the minds of many, and his identity remains as mysterious and terrifying as it has always been.